In this video, we're going to introduce and overview the basics of Koine Greek adjectives. We'll talk about the grammatical functions of adjectives, we'll talk about the forms of adjectives, and we'll talk about some grammatical rules with respect to adjectives. There will not be any practice in this particular video, so you don't need your whiteboard for it. You can sort of sit back, relax, take it all in. What I'll be doing is summarizing some of the work or some of the information that is presented to you from the textbook itself. So let's go ahead and jump on in. With respect to the basics of adjectives, grammatically speaking, in all languages, an adjective is a word that describes a noun. So whereas a noun is a person, a place, or a thing, an adjective is going to give us more information. It's going to describe that noun in some way. So the yellow dog, yellow is the adjective that is describing the person, place, or thing, in this case, the dog. In Greek, an adjective is always going to agree with the noun that it goes with or modifies in case, in gender, and in number. So with respect to case, if the noun is nominative, the adjective is going to be nominative. If the noun is genitive, the adjective is going to be genitive, and so on and so forth. With respect to gender, if the noun is masculine, the adjective will be masculine in form. If the noun is feminine, then the adjective will be feminine in form. So that means that an adjective is able to change its gender to match the noun that it goes with. The same thing is true with number. If the noun is singular, the adjective will be singular. If the noun is plural, the adjective will change to be plural. So our example here, ha, kalos, logos. Kalos and logos have the exact same ending because both are nominative, masculine, singular. The definite article, our very good friend, gives us the information for the noun and for the adjective that it goes with. So because the definite article is always going to match the noun in case, gender, and number, so also will it match the adjective that it's going with in case, gender, and number. So by simply knowing the case, gender, and number of ha here, we know the case, gender, and number of all three words. And then over here, we're never going to have something like ha, kalu, lagus, where kalu would be in the genitive masculine singular, and these two would be in the nominative masculine singular, because a Greek adjective is always going to match the noun that it's going with in case, gender, and number. So again, this being the case, most adjectives are going to change their form or change their inflection for the masculine, feminine, and neuter. They're going to look different in the masculine, the feminine, and the neuter. So what is called a three-termination adjective means it has three endings or terminations. Agathos, agathe, so you can think of that eta at the end as attached to the root agath there, and the same thing for on, agathon. This indicates that this adjective has three terminations. It has three different endings to it that can all then inflect for the different cases in those different genders. So most adjectives have three separate inflections or three terminations to them. So the example here, hey, agathe, graphe. Agathe has changed to the feminine form to match graphe, which is a feminine word by its nature. So an adjective is going to change its gender to match that, to match the gender, the case, and the number of the noun that it's modifying. And usually there are three separate inflections, one for the masculine, one for the feminine, and one for the neuter, as indicated in a vocabulary list or dictionary with these endings following the entry. There are some adjectives that do not follow this rule. That is to say, they do not have three terminations. They do not have three different endings to match the noun that they go with. Rather, they have two separate inflections or endings, one for the masculine and the feminine combined, and one for the neuter. These are called two termination adjectives because they only have two terminations or two endings. So adunatos, adunaton would be the full version of this here. only two different endings. So adunatos could be either masculine or feminine, but it's never going to look like adunate. You're never going to see that because that is not an adjectival form of this. There is no termination, there is no ending that looks like that. Rather, the tos could be masculine or it could be feminine. So in the case here, hey, adunatos graphe, adunatos is actually feminine because of that rule up here that a Greek adjective is always going to agree with the noun that it's modifying in case, in gender, and in number. Adunatos has to be feminine even though it doesn't look feminine. And it doesn't look feminine because it is a two-termination adjective. So once again, this over here, who is this? That's right. This is your very, very, very good friend because the definite article is telling you all the information you need to know about both of these words, even though adunatos doesn't necessarily look feminine. We know it's feminine for two reasons. The most obvious one is because it has hey before it. Hey is telling us the information about both adunatos and graphe. Feminine nominative singular. The other reason that we know this is feminine, and this is the sort of more detailed explanation, is because this particular adjective is a two-termination adjective that doesn't take a separate first declension ending. The second declension ending covers both the masculine and the feminine. So all this to say, there are two different kinds of adjectives, or two different ways that adjectives inflect, either with three separate inflections or only two inflections. Three termination adjectives are going to be far more common than two termination adjectives, but don't be surprised if you see something like this, and it's always good to get a little help from your friend, the definite article, that's going to tell you the grammatical information with respect to case, gender, particularly in this case, and number. So let's go ahead and look at some different forms of the adjective. So you'll notice up here, we've got different kinds of stems. This is adjective forms for consonant stems. That is to say, adjectives whose stem or root ends in a consonant. So here, that is going to be the theta. And you'll see how this is a three-termination adjective. If we were to look at this in a dictionary, it would be agathos, they, thon, and this dash is implying that that whole root is in front of that ending there. So this is what this three-termination adjective with a consonant stem looks like. And notice how our friends, our mnemonics, swain ionesus and asina ionesos, are once again a bit helpful for us. So you can see this in the swain ionesus, and then the no alpha here because this is using an eta rather than an alpha, but seen, and then no alpha again, ion esos. So once again, our mnemonics are going to be our friends with respect to these endings. Also notice that our neuter are in the nominative and the accusative are exactly the same as one another in both the singular and the plural, and they look different from the masculine. That rule holds for adjectives just as it does for nouns and also for the definite article. Adjective forms that end in epsilon, iota, or rho are going to look like this. Very, very similar. The biggest difference is going to be over here in the feminine, where we have those alpha endings rather than those eta endings. And once again, our friends are going to be very, very helpful for us, and in fact, even more helpful for us in this case, as the asina, the alpha there, is present from our mnemonic. And then once again, our neuter is going to be the same in the nominative and the accusative. in both the singular and the plural, and it's going to differ from what we see over in the masculine. When we move over to the paradigm for the two termination adjective, it's going to look like this. Remember, in a two termination adjective, the masculine and the feminine are both encompassed by the second declension endings here. And notice once again that we have our neuters being the same as one another, but also different from the masculine and the feminine over here. And our friend Swain Ionessus is once again going to be helpful for us with respect to two termination adjectives. All right, let's move over to the different uses or the syntax of the adjective. And I'm going to come back on the screen because the information here is less nitty gritty and detailed. So there are three main uses of the adjective. So if I ask you what the use of this particular adjective is, these are the categories I am looking for. One of these three different categories. The first is what is called the attributive adjective, where something is being attributed to the noun. And the syntax here, that is, the syntax is a word that means order. The order of the words is going to have the article preceding the adjective. Usually it's going to go article, adjective, noun, but you can have also article, noun, article, adjective. There's a slight nuance here. This is the good word, and this is, in a sort of more roundabout and clumsy English way, the word, comma, the good one. The word, the good one. So this has a little bit more emphasis on the goodness of the word than this one does, but essentially they mean the same thing. And if you translated this as the good word, that is okay. An attributive adjective, so it's either going to have the article preceding the adjective, or if the sentence or the noun is indefinite, that is, it is a rather than the, you won't have any article at all before either the noun or the adjective. So a good word. Or you could even switch this word order. That's going to be a little bit less common. A word, a good one would also be the attributive use of the adjective agathos there. A predicate adjective is going to predicate something about the noun. And we predicate something about something, we usually supply a to be verb. In English, this is going to be is or are. So the syntax here is the article is not going to precede the adjective. So notice here we have ha logos, the word, and then agathos without any article preceding it. So this is going to be the word is good. Agathos, goodness, is being predicated of the word, and so we supply that to be verb. Because Greek is that's right, highly inflected language, the word order can also change in this relationship. So notice here, agathos can come before ha logos without the definite article, and it essentially means the same thing. The word is good. We swap the word order, but the definite article still does not come before agathos, indicating that this is the predicate adjective. So when there is no article before the adjective, and but there is an article before the noun, we're going to have a predicate relationship. So just because there's no article before the adjective does not necessarily mean it's going to be a predicate adjective, because it could be a whole indefinite noun and there's no article at all, and then it would be an attributive. And the really confusing part here, and this is down into the nitty gritty, is that you could technically also have a predicate relationship for an indefinite noun. So a word is good, but more often you are going to see the whole thing being indefinite in an attributive use of the adjective rather than in a predicate use. And then the final use of the adjective, you think of it just as a noun. The adjective can simply function as a noun in Greek, and we do this in English as well. But usually we stick a sort of substantive after the adjective, like the good one, or the good person, or the good man. Greek can do this without adding that extra word. By just having the article and the adjective can function as a noun itself. So ha agathos can just be the good human. And because Greek inflects for gender, very often it will inflect for the gender of the entity that it's going with. So ha agathos would probably be the good male human. He agathe would probably be the good female human. And then ta agathon in the neuter would be just the good one, the good something that does not have a gender. So 3 different uses or categories of the adjective: the attributive, which normally has the definite article preceding the adjective, excepting the case when the whole thing is indefinite. The predicate adjective, wherein the definite article does not precede the adjective. And a substantival adjective, where we do have an article preceding the adjective and there is no noun that is being modified by that adjective. All right, one more bit on the uses and the syntax of adjectives, and this is the reminder that the definite article is once again your very, very good friend. It's going to give you the information that you need. It's always good to rely on your friends. So an adjective is always going to agree with the noun that it modifies in case, gender, and number. But this doesn't mean that it necessarily will always look like the noun that is modifying in case, gender, and number, because of the way that declensions work and the way that nouns will use different endings for different kinds of nouns. So for example, we have first declension masculine nouns, remember. So you have something like ha mathetes, which means the disciple. So even though tes, the ace ending, is one we normally associate with the first declension feminine, particularly in the genitive singular, in the case of ha mathetes, this is actually a noun that means the disciple, that is masculine in form. So we do have occasions in which the noun uses a different declension that's not normally associated with that particular gender. So all of this to say, an adjective, for one reason or another, for that reason or a different reason, might not look like the noun that it's modifying with respect to their endings. Their endings might look different from one another, though they are still always actually matching one another in case, gender, and number. And so this is why the definite article is your very, very good friend, because it is always very, very reliable, as good friends are. That is to say, the definite article is not going to look different. It's always going to look the same, and it's always going to give you the information about the adjectives and the nouns that it's going with. So graphe does in fact look like the first declension nominative feminine singular, what we would expect to see. But because the adjective that's modifying it here, adunatos, is a two-termination adjective, that is to say the masculine and the feminine forms are the second declension. There is no separate first declension termination for adunatos. This is feminine, even though it's a second declension. And the reason we know that it's feminine is, one, it's a two-termination adjective, but also from our very good friend, the definite article, which is in the feminine right here. And then ton agathon down here, we have ton looking like the ending of agathon here. These two sort of match one another. They look the same because they are both, they could be accusative masculine singular, or they could, technically speaking, be neuter. In this case, they are probably masculine because disciples in the New Testament normally are masculine with respect to grammatical gender. And the named disciples in the New Testament are also usually masculine with respect to biological gender as well, or biological sex, I should say. In any case, this is going to be a accusative masculine singular. It looks the same as this accusative masculine singular ending for the adjective, though the ending for the noun looks different because mathetes is a masculine noun that uses first declension ending. So even though this ain doesn't look like these two endings, we know all of our grammatical information here from our really good friend, the definite article. So this is all the caveat that even though a noun is always going to match, or I should say an adjective is always going to match the noun that it's modifying in case, gender, and number, this doesn't always mean that they will look the same. And your go-to, the best thing that you can do is depend on your really good friend to get the information for either or both the adjective and the noun.